as the total disrespect for the African. I knew there was disrespect, I just didn't realize it was as profound.
But I really want to talk about Emmanuel Macron, who is the leader of France, now that he defeated Le Pen, and he's been lauded as the new leader of the free world. There's been kind of a vacuum left by America and the UK. By the way, the free world is just something that the West makes up, but whatever. But Macron, when you put him next to Trump, or when you put him next to Theresa May, or his opponent Le Pen, he obviously seems like the best leader ever. And certainly compared to them, I think he is much better, especially his opponent Le Pen, who was incredibly racist, essentially a white nationalist, had Nazi ties, etc. But Macron is really a part of this toxic brand of neoliberalism that has led a lot of the globe down this disastrous path. And I think that toxic brand of neoliberalism was best exemplified in this really offensive statement that he gave about Africa recently at the G20 summit. He said,
the challenge in Africa is very different and much more profound. It is civilizational today. What are the problems in Africa? Failed states, complex democratic transitions, demographic transitions, which is, as I said this morning, one of the essential challenges in Africa. When countries today have 7 to 8 children per woman, one can use and dispense billions of euros and still stabilize nothing.
Macron said this in response to an Ivory Coast journalist asking about France's aid to Africa. And what he said, in my opinion, was deeply offensive. Is it not any different than what Bill O'Reilly used to say on Fox News, blaming black culture for the poverty and violence that the black community is currently experiencing? They're blaming the symptoms of oppression on the inherent traits or culture of the oppressed. It's a step away from eugenics, and it's deeply offensive. And did Macron go to history class?
As the total disrespect for the African. I knew there was disrespect, I just didn't realize it was as profound as it was. And I wondered, was there a memo that went around the world that I just didn't know about? A memo that said, no matter where you go on earth and you encounter black people, disrespect them?
France was a part of the colonization of Africa, a big part of it, where they cut up this continent into arbitrary states, ravaged its resources, brutalized its people, and when Africa tried to set up its own nation states, the West broke it down and tore it down because it wasn't beneficial to their trade and to their greed.
The continent with everything and anything the world needs. The continent that everybody is going to for their needs. But the continent that we, the children of Africa, are busy running away from. That keeps me up every night. The more I try to dig deeper in understanding as to why Africa is where Africa is today, I couldn't help but find myself repeatedly going back to the beginning to say, how did we end up where we are as Africans? How did we get here? Not only as black people, but as Africans. The colonizers started coming to Africa, starting with the Portuguese, followed with slavery. But by 1884, after they had been haphazardly going into our continent, looting from the Africans, pretty soon they started looting from each other the loot that they had looted from the Africans. And before you know it, they were killing each other. And they were getting ready to have a war, a European war on the African soil. So Bismarck, the Chancellor of Germany at that time, called his sidekick Leopold, King Leopold of Belgium. He said, listen, we got a problem. We're getting ready to kill each other and have a European war in Africa. Why don't we call all the colonizers? That was France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Belgium, and of course the mighty Britain. Let's all meet in Berlin, Germany, and strategize on how we can organize ourselves so we can effectively see to it that Africa and her children are forever defeated and dominated. Between November of 1884 and February of 1885, I repeat, the colonizers met to strategize on how to see to it that the continent and its children are forever defeated and dominated. Please hear me on that. 1884. They also put a decision in place to see to it that black people will always believe that everything about Africa, everything about black people was bad and undesirable, and that everything European was better and more desirable. They proceeded to chop up our Africa into tiny little countries that we know of today. Economies that are designed to see to it that they will never make it on their own. And in the event those small economies do make it, they're easy to destabilize. Who, in their right mind, puts a country together like Gambia, Burundi, Togo, Djibouti, Lesotho, Swaziland, and many, if not all, African countries? Each one of them was given the same sovereignty as China, as India. If this world was to be a boxing game, you see, in boxing, they understand that heavyweights belong in the heavyweight boxing ring, middleweights in the middleweights, lightweights and wannabes in their rings. Wannabes are way out there. You don't take a wannabe boxer and throw them in the same ring with the heavyweight. But what's being done to our Africa? Let's start negotiating. It's country against country. Countries, please stand up. Little Gambia stands up. And Gambia is supposed to negotiate with China. Lesotho is supposed to negotiate with India. Swaziland must jump in with the United States. Djibouti, you must go in. You see, the Europeans realized as individual European countries, they can make it. So they came together as the European Union. So they negotiate as a bloc. So yeah, Djibouti, you go in with EU. And when the African countries lose, the world stands back and says, what's wrong with you, African countries? Why aren't you able to manage your people?
Talk about economic gains and blame people that aren't economically successful. It is a branch of conservatism. And it echoed comments made by Hillary Clinton about Africa when she was Secretary of State back in 2010.
I mean, for goodness sakes, this is the 21st century. You know, we got to get over what happened 50, 100, 200 years ago. and let's make money for everybody. That's the best way to try to create some new energy and some new growth in Africa.
She continued, saying, "If you look at trade between African countries, it is abysmally minimalistic. African countries don't trade with themselves. They have barriers and tariffs and customs problems that stand in the way of developing their own economies." Another deeply offensive and arrogant comment about the continent of Africa.
1884. Fast forward 2019. Nothing has changed. The strategy that was put in place to see to it that Africa and her children are forever defeated and dominated remains alive and well.
Ignoring the West's whole role in the economic plight that many of these African countries are facing, the massive role that countries like the United States and France played in that economic despair, and blaming them for the despair that we caused. It's unbelievable to me. And that's because Macron and Hillary Clinton share the same ideology of neoliberalism.
And yet in our minds we tend to think Berlin Conference is a thing of the past. Well, my brothers and sisters, Berlin Conference is alive and well. And allow me to take it home for you. Have you ever wondered why intra-Africa trade is sitting at 18%? I'll tell you why. We have 43 different currencies on the continent. It's difficult to trade with each other because of the currencies. It's easier for us to exchange with the US dollar, with the euro, than with each other. Why is that? Berlin Conference. It's easier for Mozambique to send Mozambican oil outside Mozambique to Europe and everywhere else, just so Zimbabwe next door can buy it from across the oceans. It's easier for a company that's manufacturing the best ceramic tiles in Africa, in Egypt. That company sends its tiles to Italy, only for the Africans to turn around and buy the same tiles, 20, 30 times the cost. Why is it that we are not trading with each other? It's because, starting in South Africa, there's a road that goes up until maybe 2-3 kilometers from the border with Botswana. And that same road picks up 2-3 kilometers into Botswana. And if only we could connect the two. But Berlin Conference said, no, you're different. You're another country. You can't look at it this way. If we were to connect all the existing power lines in Africa today, we would provide electricity to 30 million more people. And in the process, we would save $20 billion. But the reason we can't connect the power lines, thanks to Berlin Conference. We're different countries. We can cross that border. Why are our children crossing the Mediterranean in search of nothing? It's because little Gambia can only create so many jobs. And a young man in Gambia, which is surrounded by Senegal, cannot go to Senegal and look for a job. Thanks to the Berlin Conference. Question then becomes, if you look at all the issues we're dealing with today in Africa, one by one, every one of them relates back to the Berlin Conference and our inability to work together as one continent, one Africa, speaking with one voice. Thanks. to Berlin Conference. As if that was not enough, when they were now getting ready to, quote unquote, give us our independence, which they never did, by the way, because we were still very much colonized, France did something deplorable. France made the African countries, the Francophone African countries, sign what they call the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. The Pact for the Continuation of Colonization was signed between 1958 and 1961 as the countries were being given their independence. The Pact for the Continuation of Colonization said, you see, you Africans, we brought you forks and knives, taught you how to sit at a table and eat. We built a few schools, a few hospitals, a few roads. We are going to call that colonial debt. And for that, you shall pay to perpetuity. They also said, you monkeys, you do not know how to manage your own money. You shall deposit 85% of your bank reserves with the French Minister of Finance. The French Minister of Finance will take all your monies, collectively lump it together, invest it in the French stock market under the French name. You may or may not know the returns. And should you want to access some of your own money, you have to submit your financial returns for your country. And if approved, you can only access up to 20% of that money as a loan at commercial interest rates. All the public and private major contracts in your countries, French companies have the first right of refusal. Your countries can only get whatever French companies do not want. Your minerals, discovered and yet to be discovered. Your oil, discovered and yet to be discovered. French companies have the first right of refusal. Today, you go to Francophone African countries. A lot of the mines are run by French companies. African countries get royalties ranging from 12 to 15%. France today is getting out of Africa over $500 billion. And the latest figures are saying for every 14 billion they take out of Africa, after they invested in the French stock market, they're recognizing upwards of 300 billion. So in actuality, France is taking out of Africa trillions of dollars year in and year out. Allow me to kind of put things in perspective for you. They want us to concentrate on corruption out of Africa, which we have. I'm not saying we don't, but I also want to say which country does not. You see, corruption is a team sport. If you cannot tell us that 50 billion is getting out of Africa every year, we want to know where it's going. Don't just tell us one side of the story. We want all the players. You can't talk about 50 billion getting out of Africa from corruption, but you don't talk about France. France, with over $500 billion. There are two thieves here. One is holding a briefcase with 50 billion, and the other one is holding a briefcase with 500 billion. I like to think I'm a smart woman. I want to go after this one first. And after France is done investing 500 billion in the French stock market, let's put things in perspective. You begin to see how the 50 billion out of Africa from corruption becomes the larger chunk under the table. They want you to stay under the table, stuck in the mud, with them highlighting corruption in Africa, so the conversation never gets beyond under the table. We must wake up. We must be on the table. We must know what is on the table. Let's not find ourselves being thrown a shiny object and following the shiny object while the real deal is over here. We must understand our Africa for what is really going on. We must see our Africa with 2020 vision and not what they want us to know.
The Guardian explained neoliberalism extremely well. Neoliberalism sees competition as the defining characteristic of human relations. It redefines citizens as consumers whose democratic choices are best exercised by buying and selling, a process that rewards merit and punishes inefficiency. It maintains that the market delivers benefits that could never be achieved by planning. And that's what it is. Because some African countries are having a harder time catching up in an economic race that was rigged by the West from the beginning, they are inefficient and thus lesser. And that is an ideology that is pervasive, and it is an ideology that is encaptured by Hillary Clinton, or was. She's not really a relevant political figure anymore, hopefully, but it is being pursued and continued by Emmanuel Macron.
March of last year, we saw our leaders coming together finally and agreeing on the decision we're now calling African Continental Free Trade Area. The African leaders said unanimously, we must speak with one voice, one continent, one Africa. We must. They also said we must negotiate as a bloc. You see, as a bloc, as Africa, we are a heavyweight. And we belong in the heavyweight boxing ring, but only as Africa. As Africa, we're the largest economy in the world, and no other country comes even close. They are fully aware of that, which is why they don't want it to happen. That is our fact. But our African leaders are beginning to see the light. In March of last year, they also agreed on the protocols for the free movement of people. They said the Africans must live and work where they choose on their continent. After they signed the African Continental Free Trade Area, now we have 52 countries that have signed. Then the heads of states have to go back to their countries and put this decision through their parliament for ratification. Of the 52 that have signed, we only need 22 to ratify. My brothers and sisters, I'm here to let you know, as of last week, we had 21 ratifications. We only need one more ratification for the African Continental Free Trade Area to become the law of the continent. Implementation is expected to begin June, latest July. The rest of the world is strategizing on how to get into Africa that is now having its doors swinging wide open. We have seen record applications for embassies in Africa than ever before. Requests for embassies from countries that never even paid attention to Africa. Why is that? Something amazing is going on in your continent. While the rest of the world is strategizing, what are the children of Africa doing? Right here in America, when you ask for the voices of the Chinese, loud and clear. When you ask for the voices of the Indian diaspora, loud and clear, the Mexicans, the Irish, the Jews. But when you ask for the voices of the African diaspora, you might as well go to the graveyard. We're missing in action. In this country, with the exception of the American Indians, everybody has their primary anchor outside the United States. And they're proud to be where they come from. They're proud of their anchor, which is outside the United States. Why aren't we proud of our primary anchor as African diaspora? Why aren't we proud of our Africa? We are busy running away from our primary anchor. I was attending an event, and the young man got up, an African man, introduced himself as a Frenchman. There was a performer, another African, introduced himself as a European. There are more Africans who would rather be French than African. There are more Africans who would rather be British than African. I have been disrespected by my own people. Many of you have stories to tell. You go home to Africa, you're disrespected. I was at the airport. I just wanted somebody to carry my luggage, the porter. And there were many of them. I called the young man, I said, help me with my luggage. You got the porter jacket. The minute I turned around, he was gone. It happened 3 times. So finally, I went to the manager, I said, what is going on? I just need a porter, I need help with my luggage. He says, Ambassador, we have a problem with this. They are waiting for the plane that's getting ready to arrive from Britain. They prefer white people. They tip them better. I was traveling with my girlfriend, both ambassadors, and her assistant was this nice Caucasian young lady. In spite of her carrying our bags, when we sat down at a restaurant, they would sooner wait on her and not us. And that's when we are home. Being disrespected by your own people at home. What is it about us? Why can't we come together? Why can't we have respect for each other? It goes back to the Berlin Conference. The legacy of colonization. The legacy of slavery. We're being told, do not trust your brother. Do not trust your sister. Well, I'm here to tell you, my brothers and sisters, if we don't come together and recognize what is getting ready to happen to our Africa, we are working for them here. We will be working for them when we go home. We are staying in their hotels here. We will be staying in their hotels when we go home. You are waiting for them to fix your Africa so you can waltz in when everything is done. Well, you're going to waltz in when you still own nothing. I've heard others say, well, Ambassador, these African leaders just want to take our money. Well, guess what? 2017, President Trump was addressing the African heads of states. And he said, I don't know why you guys are poor. My friends go to Africa poor, they come back rich. I had Africans calling me and said, oh, Ambassador, how could you talk like that? I said, did the man say anything that wasn't true? The question you should be asking me is, Ambassador, how can we do that too? That is your Africa. There is nothing wrong with you investing in Africa. You can still come back here and play golf while your money is working for you in your Africa. I was sent here to take you home. I was given this platform to open doors for you and you and you. I can only open these doors to the extent that you allow me to. I can only open these doors if you're ready to walk in. I often ask the heads of states, why aren't we giving the contracts to the diaspora? They said, Ambassador, bring them. They said, Ambassador, bring the diaspora. They laugh at me. They say, Ambassador, you're always talking about the diaspora. Where's your army? I said, watch me, it's coming. My last conversation with Madam Zuma, she said, my sister, I don't know how you're going to do it. The diaspora are a difficult group of people. They're diverse, they don't like themselves, let alone each other. I don't know how you're going to bring them together. She said, but I do know one thing. You are a black woman. I give you $10 and you will feed an army. She said, figure it out. She said, figure it out. But my brothers and sisters, I want you to know that I have figured it out. And then, my fellow brothers and sisters, I want you to know, we, the proud, intelligent, sophisticated, highly adaptable, and totally indestructible African diaspora are going to build our first Wakanda One village. You see, the issue of brain drain, some of you may not realize it. No amount of money put into Africa without the African diaspora is going to bring sustainability, and that is a fact. Today, Africa needs 1.2 million doctors. If all the continental African doctors, if all the African American doctors were to go home to Africa today, we're only going to meet about 30% of the need. That is a fact. Thanks to brain drain. There are more Ghanaian doctors in New York City alone than in the entire country of Ghana. President Kufuor, when he first came in, he thought building more hospitals and renovating the old ones would address the issues of access to healthcare. Well, guess what? Half of those hospitals, the walls are sitting empty. Why? There are no doctors. The same is true in Nigeria, Kenya, Tanzania, you name it. The reality is the capacity that Africa needs is in the diaspora. The brain drain must be reversed. In Wakanda 1, there will be a 1,000-bed hospital to train all the capacity, healthcare capacity that Africa needs. There will be 5 of these Wakanda 1 villages, by the way, 1 in each region. Each one is going to be a developmental hub for the region. In addition to the hospital, there will be a university with technical college to train all the capacity that Africa needs. There will be a large farm with a technical college for a continent with over 65% of the arable land in the world. Africa is importing food. I am ashamed to say that. Africa should, must, and will be the breadbasket of the world. There's also going to be a power plant and hotels for tourism. For a continent with some of the best tourist destinations, we're only recognizing 4%, I repeat, 4% of the tourism dollar in the world. That has got to change. There will be a pharmaceutical manufacturing plant. Some of you may not know. In most sub-Saharan African countries, over 50% of the drugs going into those countries have zero, I repeat, zero bioavailability. Our family members are dying thinking they are taking blood pressure medications, diabetic medications, antibiotics, when they are taking chalk. In some cases, poisonous substances. The multinationals are sending this poison into Africa. Millions of murders being committed every day, and nobody is holding them accountable. We must manufacture our own drugs. This carnage has got to stop. In addition, there will be, of course, the housing and infrastructure to support the development. There will be Wakanda land, and of course, a game park. All this built and operated by the African diaspora in collaboration with our brothers and sisters on the continent. No more shall we say they are not giving us contracts, because this time it's going to be different, because we are going to be on the driver's seat. Now the question is, Ambassador, how are we going to pay for this? I call that who's going to bail the cat. You all know the story of the cat and the mice? For those of you who haven't heard about it, this house was infested with mice. And so the owners decided to bring a cat in to kill the mice. So the mice did not hear, they could not see or hear the cat coming. And one by one, the mice are just disappearing because the cat is eating them. So the mice in the house decided to call for a meeting to discuss this issue of this cat. So one mouse says, we must put a bell around his neck. And all the mice cheered and said, yes, this way we can hear him coming. And one nice little mouse sitting in a corner, he says, that's all nice and wonderful, but who is going to bail the cat? Where is the money coming from? I do know there are 50 million black people in this country. If we took just 1 million and each one invests in their own account $1,000 a year, we have $1 billion. Now let's make it to $1 million. We cut it down to $500 a year. Now let's take only 5 million. That goes down to $200 a year. I'm talking hamburger money. For us ladies, I'm talking weave money. We can't do that? Yes, we can. So what I've done in this town with the Industrial Bank is create what's called the African Diaspora Savings and Investment Account. It's your own money. You can open your own account. You can take the money out if you want. We're simply saying, if you believe in your Africa, and if you believe in investing in Africa, open your account, leave your money there. The finance people are going to tell us how to make that money work. But from what they're telling me, they said, Ambassador, if the diaspora can have $1 billion in some account somewhere, under their own names, that amount can be locked down and be leveraged, where we can get $1 billion into Wakanda every year. But people have to be willing to participate. So where we are now, my fellow brothers and sisters, we have an investment in Wakanda and we have an account. I'm asking different organizations in various cities to work with their black banks and open those African Diaspora Savings and Investment accounts. It's something that we're getting ready to roll out. We've already started opening African Diaspora chapters nationwide. Texas is open. I just opened, what did I just come? Michigan. I just came from Michigan. We just opened Michigan. We're getting ready to open Minnesota. We are hoping in this town we will open Virginia, Maryland, and DC. conclude by saying, my fellow African diaspora, Madam Zuma asked me to figure it out. Madam Zuma was very clear about my message. My message was very clear to bring the African diaspora home. I've done my part. I've paved the way for us to walk the walk. I'm now only asking you to listen to the call from Mother Africa. Let's come together and speak with one voice, as one continent, as one Africa. Not as 55 African heads of states, not as 1.27 billion Africans, not as 400 million Africans in the diaspora, but as children of one Mother Africa, singing one melody, joining hands as we waltz our way across the Atlantic to our motherland. I thank you.
We must move beyond this neoliberal ideology. And my hope is that because Macron was facing such a monster in Le Pen, that this is really the last breath of neoliberalism. Brexit and Trump's election, while they were misguided, were a kick in the face to that neoliberalism ideology. And I hope that Macron is really the last leader that embodies this ideology, because we really seem to be moving beyond it as a globe, because we've all been so heavily punished by it.